All right. Perfect. Welcome, everyone, to our very first episode of Love, Happiness, Evidence Meets Emotion. This is AJOG MFM's newest podcast series, and I'm super excited to co host with my amazing host here, Dr. Vincenzo Berghella. This podcast series is inspired by Vince's work on long term empathic love, and this series is going to answer a powerful question about what happens when we bring scientific rigor to something as deeply beautiful and profound as human love and happiness. And as we continue on to these slides, I'll show you where you can find a copy of this book that really inspired the series. This book right here, Love, Happiness, as you can see here, can be found on Amazon for your copy if anyone is interested in getting a copy and listening along to us. This series, we're going to be doing at least, 7, 8, 9 series where Vince and I will discuss and talk about love, all the amazing level 1 evidence that Vince has discovered behind it, and kind of share beautiful stories, hopefully to inspire and resonate with all of you audience with us today. So thank you for joining, for listening, and for following along. As always, Vince and I always start all our sessions with gratitude. So Vince, I'll let you go ahead and take it off and whatever you're grateful for today.
Thanks for hosting this and putting this on. It's a pleasure. I'm a little bit nervous, actually, talking about love and all of that. But it's easy to share gratitude. There's a lot of gratitude. And one thing you just made me think about is this morning, my wife, we're going to be talking about partners and stuff. She said, my God, you're an 18-year-old. She said it over a very, very positive way. It may sound, stupid and stuff, but she actually meant it in a very good, positive way. And I'm thankful for her seeing me still as a, passionate, as we'll talk, and young, quote unquote, guy.
I love that. That is super fun. That almost brings back the sense of excitement in the relationship, even just hearing that. I think that's such a beautiful thing. Wow. Well, I will say I'm grateful for love in all its shape and forms, right? Like this past week, I had a chance to spend time with my family, with my husband, my kids, my mother-in-law, everyone. And today I have this privilege to talk about this beautiful topic of love, and especially with everything going on in the world, anything we can do to add some positive emotion out there and make any one person smile, I think is a beautiful thing. So I'm grateful for all of that. So thank you for inviting me to do this with you. And I know we have some beautiful slides to share as well. Perfect. Awesome. And again, for our listeners, if you're joining in or just tuned in, this series is inspired by, Dr. Berghella's amazing book, Love, Happiness, where, if I remember correctly from your book, Vince, it took, it's 40 years of work with level 1 evidence that you've kind of collected and with your own life experiences as well that you've included to kind of share these stories and your understanding of what.
Yeah, every time I write, I understand things different. Differently and much better. So the same thing professionally, if I write a book about medicine or an article, a scientific article, on preeclampsia or preterm birth or whatever, I understand things better. So that book, it's kind of over 40 years research on love and what it means, and that's where that's from.
Yeah, wow. So if you can take us back a little bit, kind of what was your inspiration? Like, when did you start writing this book, and when did you publish this?
Yeah, well, first of all, we should acknowledge, I think, our partners as well. This is Federica, my wife. One thing I want to share, and then you'll talk about your husband, Tori, is that, as we'll discuss, love is a revolution. When she met me, I didn't have any beard. I was wearing contact lenses. And she said, you know what? I think you look good in glasses. Look what I'm wearing right now. And she said, maybe you should try a beard. And, this is probably within a year or two when we met. And again, this is obviously dedicated to them, just like you're dedicating it to your own significant other.
No, thank you. I love that. Yes. And yes, this is my amazing husband, Tori. I think sometimes when you go through life, you don't realize what true love or healthy love is until you finally meet it. And then you're like, wow, you know. And, I'm really grateful to my husband, because I'll tell you, the moment people ask me, how do you know, people talk about this idea of the one and everything. I think for me, it really was, if anyone ever asked me how and why I fell in love with, my amazing husband, I would say it's because he was the first person who really taught me how to love myself. He made me fall in love
Beautiful.
with me. And like, no one's ever been able to do. And that's how I think, as we'll talk through this, is that transition from passionate love to empathic love. It's someone loves you so much and accepts you that you have no choice but to learn to love yourself too. I think that's just wonderful.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. So you were asking me about the
Yeah.
story behind this, and this is another of the many books. Some self-published, some not, but this non-medical books. This means me inside, and my first writing from 17 to 20 years old. I've always kept a diary,
Ah.
and Kavita, and as I went back, maybe 10, 20 years ago, and I put back, kind of pages here and there handwritten of my diary. One of the first things and more, convincing things I wrote is "Voglio vivere per amore," which in Italian, back then that's all I spoke. I want to live for love, and I really meant it. Maybe it was passed on by my mom. Maybe it was genetic, something I was interested in. But I always kind of, went through this search, so to speak, of what long-term emphatic love is, and so it's been a long journey, obviously over 40 years old, and it was brought us to here today. Maybe I can also talk about some of the background here, in terms of why we're doing a love sessions through the AJOG MFM software.
Mm-hmm.
First is because we have a lot of followers and they can follow us here. But in a way, there is a relationship, because most of the time, love is associated with sex. Again, not all pregnancies are planned, but some are. And, as I wrote here, 60 to 80% of sexual relationship do have emotions involved.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not all. But many do, and then again, many of the sexual encounters, at least half, if not more than that, are associated with love. And this is all evidence, scientific articles and stuff. And so, if there's love, then there's sex, and there's pregnancy, then there should be AJOG MFM. And
Yeah.
so I think that there is some relationship between the Pink Journal and love, and I kind of frame it this way.
I love that. And I love your color of your pink journal with the AJOG MFM being pink and full of love as well. And I think what a privilege for us as MFMs to be working in a field that is directly related to love, right? Like romantic love between couples, and then the fruit of it, which is a love as a family, bringing a child into the world. I think it's such a full circle moment. So I agree with you. Like, this is an amazing and appropriate platform to discuss this beautiful topic. I love it. I want to ask you one question real quick.
Yeah.
When you went back, you were talking about, at 17, that first slide, and you talked about, you want to live for love and, the search for empathic love. If you put yourself back in the shoes as your 17-year-old, did you understand love as empathic at that time at all? So did you know what you were looking for, or?
Now that you asked the question, actually, I should have put in the slides. So I actually had what I call an identikit, like a series of things. And again, I'm ashamed to say them now, but again, 17-year-old. The list was, tall, brunette, Italian, things like that, physical things, dark eyes, etc. I actually I hope that at the end of this session, people would not do that. I mean, again, if you're 17, I think I was allowed, but I think there's a lot more to that. I think it's a lot more actually how two people relate. I think you say something beautifully, love is, as we'll discuss, make it the other happy. You fell in love with your husband because you finally discover yourself and you learn to love yourself. which has nothing to do with hair color, skin color, eye color, height,
Right.
or BMI, God forbid, or anything like that. So I've come full circle. And it was a journey. I think we're bombarded by media, TV, social media,
Mhm.
that gives us some, parameters, which are really the wrong parameters, as we'll see, compared to what science shows us to really be what's most important about love. So no, I was very wrong about love when I was 17.
So it seems like, thanks for sharing that. It sounds like, what you're describing is what most people understand as passionate love, which we're going to talk about, right? And I think that's the beautiful thing about love is it's your own journey, but to find healthy love, moving from that passionate love to empathic love. Unfortunately, this is one thing that perplexes me, and I don't understand why all movies and TV shows and everything always stops at passionate love, right? Like you always see, like they'll show this perfect two people lovey-dovey in love, have a beautiful relationship, and then it stops. There's never more to follow. And I think maybe a large part of it is the mystery for us to explore the rest of that journey on our own and define it for ourselves. Because I don't think love can truly be defined in any one particular way.
Yeah, we'll discuss it. But now, in the last 4 or 5 years, since I wrote the book, etc., I love rom-com, actually. Those are my favorite kind of movie, probably because that's why we're here. But still, 99% of them, it's, two people meet and they like each other. Obviously, there's some attraction, physical attraction and stuff. And then the whole hour and a half, too, is, pursue, you go on trips, you do different things. There are difficulties. And then eventually they kiss and the movie's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, what? This is like the beginning. It's a wonderful part,
Yeah.
the searching for each other and, the revolution again that is romantic love. But we want more. I think that, what people should think about, at least, I would like, is something that can last a long time. We all kind of yearn for that. And again, some people feel free to tune out now if you don't believe in this, because I think that there is plenty of evidence that this is possible, that a certain percent of people do achieve what's in this slide, the possibility of being happy for 40, 50 years, etc. There's actually evidence for how to get there, which we'll review. There's evidence, as we'll see maybe next session, that this improves your health, your happiness, your well-being, everybody around you, your partner, etc. And I think actually that if we look at life in general, a lot of people, like, you want to be chairman professions, we're doctors, or you want to be director here, VP there, make money, etc. I think that at the end, what I hear from when 80-year-old are interviewed, or my mom is interviewed, or people I admire, kind of towards the end of their life, if they had a meaningful relationship with a significant other, that really was their success. It wasn't that they left 3 houses to each of their kids or something like that.
No, you're absolutely right. I think as human beings, physiologically, since we're born, we're all wired for connection, right? And I think that sets the stage. When you're emotionally secure, you have that sense of connection. It sets the foundation and stage for everything you go out and do in life. You talk about that with love from your mom too, that gave you the wings to come pursue everything in your life. And then, but of course, our parents cannot be with us forever. So that's where we find a person that we go through life with to continue to have that strong sense of connection and foundation. And you're right, finding a good partner is probably the most important decision we make in our lives.
My mom told me when I was 17, when I was a teenager, all the time, this is the most important decision you're going to make, whoever you're going to be with. And, we'll talk about spouses and marriage. It doesn't have to be obviously a spouse. The religion has nothing to do with what we're talking about. A contract has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's all much bigger than that. But I understood it and I didn't understand it but it's true, I think finding somebody you can really love and be loved back the way we'll discover, it's so important, much more important that even friends, love and stuff. And one other mistake I made when I was 17, I really didn't understand it as much. I was actually a mama's boy, firstborn. My mom loved me to death and unconditional love. And instead, you need to understand that no matter, how much you're attached to your family, which is so important, and you and I really believe in that, your significant other, whomever you choose to be your significant other or chooses you most of the time, should be the number one.
Absolutely. No, I'm super excited to delve into some of, the science and data you found on passionate love. We'll just scroll through and see what we have here.
Yeah. One of the things, we did this happiness talks as well, and I want to bring it back to that. It's number one key to happiness in general, in social relationships. And I think the number one social relationship maybe should be with your partner. And so even brings it back to them. And some of the data on this is that it's achievable. I'm actually gonna tell you one thing. I don't know if it's on the slides or not, but going back to when I was a little kid, or in my 20s, I had relationships, and they would last about a year and a half, all the time. My high school sweetheart, my college sweethearts, things like that. I was very, in a couple most of the time, and I would just, fall in love, be with somebody, and it would last about a year and a half. And what I was thinking, and again, we're sharing a lot of, emotional and personal information. I was always like, am I gonna, I would say, marry this person? Like, am I gonna be there with her a long term? And if getting to the 2-year mark, I wasn't convinced, we would not continue, we'll break up. And now I understand that there's a lot of evidence into that, actually, that passionate love only lasts so long, usually about 6 to 18 months. Only a few couples really can have a good relationship long enough to last for more than 2, 5, 10, 20 years. We talked about the movies, and the fact that nobody was teaching me, but nobody was telling us about empathic long-term love, but only about the romantic get-together. And nobody was talking about empathic love. And one thing we should, talk about before we get into maybe a summary of what we're going to talk about is that while both you and I in heterologous relationships, it doesn't have to be a male and female. Love is not gender, as I put in the slides. I always talk about it that my wife's cousin is gay, my own nephew, my sister son is a trans gay person, and this is not about religion, not about being married or not, and that again, this is mostly something I'm sharing. I think you're willing to share as well, and hopefully will be helpful to others. I don't know what any comments on those.
No, I absolutely agree. I think the word love is probably the most universal emotion, right? It's not bound by labels, by human ideologies and opinions and these social constructs that we come up with. So it's for everybody. It's a disruption. It's a conversation about this beautiful emotion that we all are so lucky to experience. And I think this conversation is about how do we create the best version of that emotion, and how do we take care of it for ourselves and the people we care about? So I really appreciate that slide, and I agree with you. Like in the movies and all, everything is about how people find that passionate love. And in fact, like you were sharing that story about, like after a year and a half, you were like, oh, if I'm not feeling like I'm going to marry this person, you end the relationships. I think that's a lot of people, right? Because I think society also teaches us that, oh, the moment you see conflict, it's a bad thing. But I think, between you and I, having been married now, you realize that conflict can be probably sometimes the most healthy thing to understand each other. It's about how do we navigate those conflicts? What do we do when those conflicts happen? How are we communicating? And these are such important skills that no one teaches us, right? But it's probably the most important thing you need to learn and find out for yourself. And it's so individualized because it's always based on you and the person in front of you, all coming with your different conditionings, your different values. How do you meet in the middle between that? And that's such a unique skill. And I think that's what I'm so excited about this podcast series, is talking about the empathic love, is what are those skills that help us get there? Because and there's good science behind it. So listen on. I'm super excited.
Yeah. So we'll cover a lot, and these are the 9 in these 2 slides, the 9 chapters of the book, or 10, whatever chapters of the book. So you listeners may hear us, repeating ourselves, some of the concepts as we talk about different things, but we're going to talk in the next few slides about first the definition of love, and then what we've been giving you some appetizer about passionate versus empathic love.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get to cover this today, there'll be plenty. But we'll cover eventually in the next few sessions. But the benefits of love, attachment theory is so important, the 5 love languages,
Mm-hmm.
the fact, and you were just saying it now, that we are different and we have to first know ourselves to
Right.
be able to be good in our partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
What I think are some essential, or the science things, are essential love elements, factors associated with what we're talking about, empathic, successful, long-term, true love. And then I think it's important to also talk about when things don't go well, when it's almost like with a job, we try to put our best to it, and sometimes things don't work out for whatever reasons.
Right.
And what are the signs that within the first year or 2, hopefully, or even later on, things may not be working? And then we'll again emphasize love depends on you, meaning you need to do most of the work. Actually, you always think it's our partner, and we ask our partner, but the truth is, love, it's on us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, we can start talking about that passionate love. I think there are a few more information about that. But that's the exciting thing about this talk as well, is, going from passionate love to empathic love. Like, if you find yourself in that space of conflict, I just want to remind people that does not always mean it's the end. Because if you have the opportunity to have passionate love, when it starts to transition into empathic love, which is the natural course of every long-term relationship, that transition window is, I think, when most people quit, because that is when the veil falls off. It's your true self comes to light. You're seeing the other person completely differently. This is where the work has to be done, right? And no one talks about this. It's not a seamless transition. And I think this is a good time to discuss some of the myths we hear about love. I don't know if you have any events, but I'll tell you, one of the most common myth I think about love is, you hear people always say, oh, this is my better half. This person completes me. And growing up, even that was always my idea and my philosophy of love too. Like, you want to find your person to complete you. This is my, my half, my other half, my better half. But when you really understand love, you are not half and they are not half. We both have to be 2 whole people. And I think having this foundation is so important, because I think this is the main foundation for a long-term love. Because if you walk into the relationship where you're half, the passion part is awesome because you're meeting each other's needs so well. But when you're making that transition into empathic love, the half is not going to sustain you, because you're asking someone else to fill the other half. But it's you being whole. And we all are born with love. And as we grow up, we build all these walls of fear, self-doubt, shame, conditioning. Are we good enough? Do we deserve love? Do I have to excel myself to achieve love? We build all these constructs that prevent the wholeness we have from getting out into the world. And I think when you find the right relationship, your job is not having them break down these walls, but you breaking down these walls to allow yourself to experience that love.
Couldn't agree more, and I'll expand on the slides I'm showing. So, you start from the definition of love, and I think one of the best definitions I've ever seen written or studied is love is trying to help the other be. So you said it yourself, it cannot be two halves. The person needs to be whole and happy. I see it similar, Kavita, to, our work with trainees or work with, I have kids, and love is not only between, two people in a relationship, but it's also, loving your mom and dad and loving your kids and your friends. We're focusing on romantic love, between two people. But if love is striving to make the other one happy, that means that unless the other one is happy, is whole, so she's following the career she wants, she's following the calling she wants. If she likes dogs, she has time to spend time with dogs, even if you don't like it too much. If she wants to go skiing, sometimes you go skiing if you don't love it too much. Or you're trying as much as you can to make the other person happy, because I cannot be happy unless my partner is happy. And where I failed in the past, to be sincere, is that if you're going to make your significant others, even in this early relationship, happy, then they're going to bring you down, right? Or if they don't make you happy, it's a two-way street. You're going to bring them down. And the idea is to, make yourself happy. You go up, you make myself happy, we up, you continue to shoot for the stars and the sky, and not to be too, Pollyanna, but that's truly, I think, where the evidence is that. I'll tell you a quick story, and sorry to be personal.
No.
Mom and Dad, for me, were in a very personal traditional, like an old school. My dad was a breadwinner, my mom was a homemaker. And my dad always thought that keeping, quote unquote, my mom at home, was the best thing. But my mom had a law degree, actually, which, back many, many years ago was incredible. Was one of the few women in Italy to finish university, finish well and stuff. And she wanted to work. We were 3 kids, and I'm sure we were keeping her busy, but she had help at home. And especially later on, as we got bigger, she would have done anything, and that's what I mean by love. You shouldn't keep it to your own traditional beliefs or what you were taught in your upbringing. You need to make that a person happy, whichever way she or he wants to be happy.
No, I completely agree. And I think love can be cultivated. When you're talking about your parents, that reminds me of a story, how my parents met too, because I come from a culture where, arranged marriages were normal, right? Like for my parents, they met 1 week before they got married.
Wow.
Yeah. And, next year they're going to be together for 40 years. So they'll be celebrating their 40th anniversary. And they have a beautiful relationship. They have their ups and downs. They definitely do, but it goes to show that we all have the ability to cultivate love, even if it did not start off that way. Not all relationships have to start off as passionate love, but it can still evolve into empathic love along the way, because that actually is what ends up sustaining the relationship.
And, we'll see that, again, unlike color hair, color eyes, like I was saying, etc., having, similar likings, similar background, etc., helps. I always tell this story. Sometimes you meet people at a party and they tell you their whole life, and you never met them before, you never met them after, but for an hour you share everything. That happens. And this was a couple, and he was German, she was Thai. They true story. I know you come from there. They obviously, had different religion, different upbringing, different. They came from geographic areas. There was some like, where are you going to live, different languages, right? They had 3 kids, but clearly after, I don't know what it was, 30, 40 years, they were older, they were happy, but they say, we it wasn't easy. We had to work at it even more than others because some of these differences, we kind of had to discuss them, overcome, compromise. I think that the good news here, going back to kind of what the book talks about, is that it depends on you and how much you put in the relationship. If you need to make the other happy, that, if you do something she or he likes, in terms of, they like to dance, maybe you go to dance once in a while. They want to go home, you go home. Whatever are their needs, their wants, it's so important to discover them without assuming, just because you like to dance, that they like to dance, just because you like to party with music and karaoke, maybe that person is introverted and doesn't like it that way. And I think too many times I see people kind of projecting their likes to the other ones. Oh, dancing is fun, No, not for everyone. So you have to know yourself first, what you like. And I wrote, so you can understand what person matches you best as lover. Meaning and I'm talking about dancing, I don't know why, but, just as an example, if you cannot live without dancing and the other person cannot dance or doesn't want to dance, I think it's the sooner the better. And like, Kavita, it's always like, she's gonna like dancing, because I like it so much and she loves me. But we shouldn't go in a relationship for week one thinking I'm gonna change my partner.
Yeah.
We should go into I'm gonna celebrate that she doesn't like to dance.
Yeah.
Because that's who she is. I'm not gonna pretend that she needs to come my and if we go into the relationship understanding that, it's already a much higher chance of being successful.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I love that. I love the concept. And I think that's why when you talk about knowing yourself, I think the important thing in getting into a long-term healthy relationship is knowing what your negotiables and your non-negotiables are. I think that's really important because, like you said, like dancing, for example, if you're someone that like dancing brings you so much joy, it is a big part of your life, and that is something you want to share with your partner. Now, if your partner is perfect in every way, but that part you can't match, and that's going to be a big part of your sorrow your whole life, that might be a non-negotiable. But versus for some person where you're like, okay, I love dancing, but it's not the end of the world if my partner doesn't, that's your negotiable, right? So I think when you're doing your own, everyone needs to reflect on who they are as a foundation for everything they do. And by writing down what are some of your negotiables and non-negotiables, and I think important while making this list is your values too. Like negotiable and non-negotiable values, like for example, honesty, transparency, this should be a standard for everyone. But the truth of the world we live in, for some people, they might say, hey, a white lie is not it's okay, it's not the end of the world. There are people out there that have those beliefs because they might think, well, I'm protecting my partner by just giving a white lie. But if honesty is something that's your non-negotiable, a white lie is also not okay, So I think knowing those things before you go into the relationship, because you're never going to know everything about your partner until sometimes new things you're discovering 5-10 years down the road. And you can't just be like, okay, now this didn't meet my need, you got to go. So constantly reevaluating. And I think as a person, we have to also realize that we can be flexible because what we like today might not be what we like 5 years from now too. We change, we grow, we evolve, right? And what we thought was so important to us at one point in our life, we might look back and be like, why did I even care that much about that? Now it's not even something I think about,
And I love what you just said. It's so important. And keeping an open mind that we learn from the other as well, So first of all, going back to the identikit that I had, I would have something like you talked about now, I would have sincerity, honesty, hopefully my partner would already know what she likes and she's already mature and she knows what she wants, what she likes, so that
Mm-hmm.
It's one day she likes one thing, one day another thing. It's harder to love her, to make her happy if she changes all the time. Federica doesn't mind, but Federica, for example, has no sense of direction. Zero. She comes out of the house. We lived in the same place now for many years. She takes a right. She's supposed to go left. It's just but I love that. It's endearing. Maybe it's not a quality in itself. We actually bought a used Tesla. They come very cheap now. There's so many in the markets. She presses a button and it takes her to work. She
Yeah.
doesn't even have to know the direction, self-driving cars. That's talking about how things change. We talked about beautifully. So yeah, write down again, not height or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even religion or whatever, but write down the important things, like having a goal, that she has goals in life and she knows what she wants and she's mature and honest and whatever it is, and again, maybe honest is not so good for you and other things, but and then be open. You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
find out for sure that the partner has hidden idiosyncrasies. They're not going to be always qualities
Yeah.
or virtues, but idiosyncrasies that you're going to love. Their crooked
Mm-hmm.
teeth or their
Mm-hmm.
even smelly feet, or there are
Mm-hmm.
things that may sound terrible that at the end are the things that you love the most
Yeah.
about that person.
Yeah. I agree. And I think at the end of the day, love is not just an emotion, right? We confuse it that to feel love means we have to have this heightened emotion of joy and stars shining everywhere all the time. But love is a choice, right? It is a choice in those hard, quiet moments when things might seem like you're so filled with doubt and questions and fear, and still saying, no, I choose to be here. And I'm gonna choose to try to understand myself and my partner and bring empathy. That I think is love. It's an action. I think you wrote in your book very beautifully. Love is action. It's a verb. It's
Yeah,
not emotion. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So I think in the last part, we could begin to talk about this difference between passionate and emphatic love. At
Hmm.
least maybe today, we talk about the passionate part, the
Hmm.
beginning, and then maybe next part we'll emphasize more empathic love. And passionate love, it's almost the easier part. We kind of touched on it. It's what people call falling in love. The Greeks called eros, so there's some sexuality in there, with some people there kissing passionately. Certainly what I taught, as a young adult, what love would be. The fact that, again, the relationship then would last usually less than 2 years because I wasn't really ready for empathic, more mature love.
Hmm.
And, it's kind of the idealistic time in which your partner is perfect, does nothing wrong. And, the rose lenses make it so that,
Hmm.
your partner has no flaws, perfect, omnipotent,
Yeah.
omnipresent. We're completely blind. Our friends may say, hey, look, but in fact, this is what they say about her or what she's done, but we don't believe it. I remember I did this so many times. Like, I would have my idea of a person and then I would go out with somebody and think, okay, they're going to be the way I'm thinking somebody should be, not the way they
Exactly.
really are. And if they, for example, I'm a physical touch person, I'm a hugger. If they don't
Hmm.
act, oh, they'll change, and this is
Hmm.
the time in which you think, oh, yeah, they'll hug and stuff, because everything is beautiful, grandiose, you're ecstatic. And again, as I wrote here, you lose touch of time when you're together, time flows and you know,
Absolutely.
you're in
I
flow.
And that brings me to a point. I feel like when people, it reminds me, sometimes some people go through relationships and then let's say something bad happens at the end, and you'll be like, but they were so perfect. I loved how they were back then. But if you really stop and think, they've now changed. You didn't love who they were back then. You love how you felt about yourself when you were back then. And what you felt about yourself was the projection of your inner world that this person's perfect, or it was this elevated physiological elevated hormones and everything in your system because of, the oxytocin, the epinephrine, all of those things do contribute to you feeling those things. And you think it's coming from the other person, but it's not. It's all internal, right? And then you say they change. Then you tend to blame the other person. But if you really stop to think about, like, were we really willing to see things as they were? Most of the time, not in the beginning, And though that, yeah.
You're just projecting, like, again, your pre-encounter, like even before you met them, this is what you were hoping love was, and you're projecting it completely on that person.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying, I think we're saying it's bad. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's just the way scientific we are. We are like walking on clouds, as people say. You're not touching the ground, meaning you're not living in reality. You're just living your la la land, which is beautiful, which we all want, and everything is colored by that those endorphins, oxytocin, like you call them, serotonin, etc. And it's beautiful, but we just need to be aware at some point that that's what it is. We're in passionate love. So, like, this person is Superman, or Superwoman, irresistible, uncontainable. I love the fact that people don't think about emotion, motion, move away, that all of a sudden everything changes, and I really, really, like, when I was 17, again, I understand this. It's a revolution, because you, by going out with this person, now you're not going out with others. Your relationship with the world, your friends, completely changes. Now you're in a relationship. Your relationship to your family, your parents, your sister, your brother, etc., changes. And sometimes, actually, we're so blind that if there are difficulties, we heard so many stories, sometimes we could care less. And the more difficult it is, the more we want it. Okay, she lives in Seattle, I live in Florida, or she lives in Bangkok, and I live in Italy, or whatever. And we think that everything is possible in this big revolution.
No, I completely agree. And I think as humans, we all have an ego too. It's an ego is not a bad thing. When people hear the word ego, it thinks it's a bad thing, but it's just a part of you that's protecting you, right? But it's also that part of you that loves challenges, and sometimes might be the one that thinks like, oh, I'm going to be one to make this okay. I'm going to be one to make, this is going to be fine. It didn't work with other people. It's going to work with me. Just this kind of cognitive dissonance of what's real. And eventually you step out of that la la land and then into the real world. And I think that's where true love really begins. It's not during the passionate love phase at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, another example I was going to make, and I'll keep the slides on, is, for example, people like Liz Taylor, famous actress from many, many years ago. She got married 8 times. And, when I think about that, it's like, some people kind of like to be in passionate love. They're just like this first, 6 months, a year or 2, 3 max, in which, as you can see here, it's paradise on earth. Nothing is impossible. The hormones we talked about, we're in a high. Everything is perfect. You're fulfilling your dream. We feel validated because, hey, here's someone who loves us no matter how we are, because they also see us with rose lenses. So no matter how flawed we are, they're in love. One of my favorite movies is Notting Hill, the bottom of the slides. And Notting Hill is the same thing. The two of them look for each other, court each other. It's difficult because she's so famous and he's nobody, this and that. And then eventually the end of the movie is like, they got together, but you don't know if they're going to be happy for a long, long time. I wrote this book up here on the right. It's The First Love, Il Primo Amore, Non Ti Scorda Mai. You never forget the first love.
Oh.
And I was 16 when I wrote these letters that I put in this in this book. And we actually kind of looked like this because I had a lot of hair and she was on the lighter side. And this thing is from Cinema Paradiso, a famous book also about, a relationship when you're young that never really evolves into empathic love.
Mm.
But also say that this is kind of the sparkle which we all need and we all go through, and it's wonderful, but it's bound not to last forever. It's physiologic that this only lasts a certain amount of time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's why, in our upcoming sessions, will be really beautiful to kind of transition into talking about empathic love, because I think to have empathy for someone else and to love them in a way that you're willing to give and understand, it requires a lot of work and effort. Because I think that's the other myth, right, that we are taught, is that love should be easy. With the right person, you shouldn't have to fight. It's easy. It doesn't take effort. But that's not true at all. Healthy relationships, conscious relationships, involve a lot of difficult conversations. It involves a lot of being honest with yourself, knowing who you are, working through your own things so you can have empathy for the other person. And I think that's why, the rest of the book, you talk about love languages, attachment styles, all this come into play. Once you understand all of that, then you can really have true empathic love. It's a journey. It's a beautiful journey that takes effort, but so worth it.
Yeah. And, to kind of wrap up the last couple of slides, it's important to realize when you're in passionate love, to know that then empathic love, the long-term one you've been talking about, is different. In this initial phases, it's almost like you recognize your dream because you're projecting,
Yeah.
and time does not exist. Like, you think this person was just made for you, and finally you found you're unifying, we shouldn't say half and half, but you're unifying with another part of yourself that you thought was lost. And now you're going to really be, two people together that can form a better, relationship. And you cannot do without the other person. You want her around all the time, day and night.
I love.
But eventually you also need to go ahead. Do you want to say something?
No, I say I love this. This is good advice. Like, during passionate love, don't make early commitments. And for some people, it works and it's last, but it's not for everyone. Yeah.
Not for everyone. So a couple of the warnings before we will talk about empathic love is, first of all, another thing that we kind of gave, kind of assumed, people, you need to have some courage to go through this revolution, because, usually you do get to empathic love, to some kind of passionate love, most of the time, not always, like you said at the beginning. So it takes some courage to jump in. I love when you say jump in, you jump in, and you, because you could be rejected, it's going to cause all kinds of social revolutions in your life. And so some people just sit back, and either never kind of try for love, or because they've had some difficult situations in the past, don't go back and go into passionate love. And then, really important, like you're saying, do not make commitment when you're blind, or your glasses that don't make you see so well. And maybe we'll stop at this slide. The difference is that I'm very nearsighted, and without glasses I can't see that well. So passionate love is almost like that. Everything is a blur and wonderful, etc. But eventually glasses will come back. I also heard flower versus fruit, both beautiful. Flower, passionate love, colorful, etc. Fruit lasts longer. Passionate is more idealistic. Everything is perfect. But empathic is real. It's you're not looking at a false mirror, so to speak, but you're really looking at a reality.
Yeah. No, beautiful. I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. And I think when I think about a sentence that comes to mind that really summarizes all of this is, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are, right? And this is true for everything in life, and whether it's passionate love, in that moment we are elevated, and or whether it's empathic love, because even in that thing, we're looking at the relationship from a place of our past conditioning. It is still, and it shines light on the parts of us we need to work on. So Yep, this is just has been such a beautiful, heartwarming discussion to open up this series, and just this we literally just touched on just the first couple chapters of your book. There's so much more, I'm excited to talk to you about and to share with our audience, and hopefully in the next few sessions we can even have our more friends and partners join us, and make this a really lively discussion too. So thank you, everyone.
Can you put that book, the cover up real
Yes.
quick? I mean, I want to end on a note.
Yes.
That is my hand, if you could put it on the hands, and Federica's hand. And it was her idea, when I was writing this book, inspired certainly by her. That's okay. And she said, let's go to the roof. And it was a beautiful, clear day, as you could see. And she had this idea of taking just a selfie of our hands, together. And it's so beautiful. And so let's dedicate this to our partners. And one thing I certainly asked Frederica already, at some point we may have them come on in some of the next few sessions, so they can also tell you the truth. I think that we're sharing something very emotional, very, very true, but also very scientific. We're not perfect by any means, but I think the idea is to share what we've learned so far and to help people kind of achieve long-term love, if that's what they're looking for.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Vince. This was so wonderful. And thank you to all our audience for joining. And we'll post our updates on when our next session is. And hopefully you'll be able to continue joining us on our next few sessions too. Have a great day. And may everyone's week be filled with so much love. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thanks, Kavita. That was great.